Alright, so today is Wednesday, May 2nd of the year 2012. The other day, a friend of mine called me and he told me he was coming out as an atheist. And I don't have a problem with that, but I think kind of you should do more research on things. I know what it's like to go through like a disillusioning experience. Like, I had a terribly disillusioning experience with a lot of spiritual things. Starting around 2007, and it really crashed for me around the year 2009, and I was really angry, very angry person. But there's a number of my friends who, at the moment, they are saying that they are self-professed atheists, except I find that many people who jump to this conclusion actually don't know what atheism actually is or actually means. And I think it would behoove you to, actually just research it so you can be sure. Because basically, atheism, it only means that you neither believe or disbelieve, or that you just disbelieve. You have no belief in the concept of a deity at all. Any deities. Gods, whatever. Right? And just so you know, I'm not going to be putting tags on this video of atheism, because I'm absolutely fed up with arguing with fundamentalist atheists who don't really even know what atheism is either. Now, I'm not an atheist, so I'm just going to be perfectly clear with that. However, on YouTube, I actually am subscribed to people who are either atheists or anti-theists, and I think a lot of people confuse what atheism is and think it's anti-theism, which it's not. Atheism is just a disbelief, which is a belief that there is no God. Disbelief in, or that there is no deities, or the disbelief that there is no deities. Anti-theism is the belief of against the idea, the very against idea of the concept of deities or gods or whatever, supreme beings. If you're finding that your reason for calling yourself, referring to yourself as an atheist, it's because you hate religion and you hate these ideas and these stories and these sounds of gods or religious things, whatever, you might actually be an atheist. I mean, anti-theist. So you might want to look into that. Now, I follow some of these people because I like what they have to say. They use critical thinking. They use what you would call critical thinking, logical thought, reasoning, rationality, but they're not necessarily rigid, and if you point things out to them, they will acknowledge it. And yet at the same time, everyone has the prerogative to have their own belief, to have their own belief system or whatever. And the way I see it is, I don't think I should just be stuck in one thing, and that if I find that something is right or wrong or better or worse, that I have every right to choose it, and that I should actively constantly self-evaluate. Because I know people will say, well, you're being a flip-flopper or this or that. Yeah, but if I find that something is wrong, why would I stick with it? Now, the reason why I could never actually make the full conversion to atheism, because of there's these gray areas, and a lot of them are based with my own personal experiences. When it comes to people who tend to congregate together, it's almost like there's many kinds of atheists. There are the kinds that are the religious kind, which they go to their own meetings, or they even call themselves atheist churches, and they're very interested in proselytizing people to be atheists, and they get angry with anybody who doesn't agree with them. I mean, it's just the same personality type as these religious fundamentalists whom originally you didn't like. I mean, if you're turning into what you didn't like, but in your version of, in your religious version, I don't like that. I'm not interested in that, and I don't want to push people to be an atheist. But another thing that people who think that they're atheists are mistaken about is that this thing called scientism. And scientism is basically this belief that if humans have if a human can based on the senses of a human being, like sight, sound, like hearing, touch, taste, smell, or measurements that are created by humans, and if you can measure it, if you can look at it, if you can capture it, if you can observe it, then that's the only way that it's true. That's the only way that something exists. Except I have a lot, where this gray area is, like this idea that if only humans can, only a human can see it, touch it, experience it, or measure it, then, like, what about if I can't measure it yet? Like, for example, radio waves. I can't see radio waves. I would have never known about radio waves unless someone had built radio receivers and so on, right? But, oh, now that we have these measurements to measure them, oh, it exists now, it's real. Like, doesn't work for me. It doesn't. It really doesn't. And then another thing which is popular among atheists, which isn't what atheism actually is. I mean, people, personally, I prefer philosophy because there's so many aspects to it, ranging from the very esoteric to the very hard-nosed sciences and so on. And that's why I love it, because you can do in philosophy what's called, thought experiments, or thought, like, it's almost like you bounce ideas off of each other, and you're picking apart, and you're using your mind. Your mind has the ability to do this. You can be rational, you can be logical, you can think about these things. Everyone has the ability to do this, but you won't know that in most person's cases unless you're taught this, or you're taught how to do this, or how to utilize this part of your mind or your brain. It's basically critical thinking. Right? It can be everything from challenging an idea to like engineering or problem solving. Very basic stuff. It can go from the very basic to the very complex, right? And then even with critical thinking, you could take something which is complicated and pick it apart and, solve it. Well, the thing that I was going to talk about is this. There's this belief, very common belief with atheists, is that there's no afterlife, and there's no heaven, or there's no soul, there's no spirit, or whatever. And that's kind of the thing that doesn't work for me. Actually, atheism is just the belief that there are no deities. It has nothing at all to do with whether you have a soul or not. Now, if you were to go on to, like, for example, like iTunes, if you don't have iTunes, you can go on Google, you can search it, look it up, download it, install it, it's free. And then you can search for it. They have a thing called iTunes U. And U, I think it's still called that. It stands for university. I think it's still called that. Now if you go there and you type in like keywords in the search, you can search for philosophy. And a lot of times if you're first getting into philosophy, I know a lot of teachers, like there's some Oxford ones, let me see. Is it called yes, it's still called iTunes U. Yes, like I have about, just that I downloaded here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The ones that I have that are from Oxford, Oxford, that's in England, okay? So this is a real actual lecture, real actual class, that if you were to go to the class and pay the money, that's what you would be learning, okay? And she goes on and on about, the instructor, the teacher, the professor, about how difficult philosophy can be sometimes. But for me personally, I don't feel that way. I feel it's, I don't know, almost invigorating or enjoyable. Like, I I enjoy the experience of, like, I feel like I need it, that I need to consider things, I need to evaluate things, right? Well, when it comes to, for example, this just concept of, let's just call it soul for argument's sake purposes, even though I've heard other arguments of people of spirit versus soul, and there's a difference, or we have a spirit and a soul, or the monad, or whatever, and I don't even want to talk about that. Whatever, that's like calculation stuff and so on. But when it comes to this concept of a soul, I really liked a lot of the ancient Greek arguments, which still stand up for today. I'm not sure if these particular, if any of these iTunes ones talk about this concept, but I like philosophy so much. If I could go to get a PhD in philosophy, I would definitely do that. I'm just really broke. But as an artist, and I've had many of my friends, people specifically whom I respect, discuss this, people whom I believe are more intellectual than I am, and I gravitate to people who are very intellectual. This concept of a soul, like when you think about it, and that's of course what you need to do is think, that, you know, every person, every human being is an individual. You have variations within you, and yet there is so much that is similar, and yet you still have these differences, and thus we have biological things, and then when it gets to something like, for example, identical twins, whom are literally clones of each other from the womb. They are exactly the same in every way when they are born, okay? And yet they will have distinctly sometimes different personalities, or different quirks, or different likes and dislikes. And I know people have heard the different, like say, well, they're exactly the same, they're exactly this or that, but it's actually not that way. It's not. I've known people who were identical twins, and they don't necessarily always exactly think alike, or exactly finish each other's sentences, or all these other funny things, but I've known identical twins who, one had a disease, which was a Hodgkin's disease, I think it was, and the other one was the exact genetic everything, and he did not. And everybody was freaking out, and they're like, oh, well, it's going to be inevitable, and, you know, 10 years later, he didn't even have it, right? Well, for me, when it comes to, like, and this is something that artists, whether it's you're a visual artist, whether it's you're drawing or painting, sculpting, sketching, creating, sewing, cooking even, and especially music even, but also writing, there is a point where you sort of get into this this state where it's like it feels like, people often say, like, they're in the zone, or they're in the flow, or they're going with the flow, or they're channeling. It's this kind of like flowing kind of thing. And then it feels like sort of this other part of you, or even like it's not even you. And it just seems to come through you, and there's times where I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know what is happening, and then I have made some kind of amazing creation kind of thing. And there are people whom are artists, whom are my friends, whom still are on the fence, and they are not sure whether to call themselves atheists or agnostics. And they even talk about this thing, and they said, I don't understand this either. I don't know where it comes from, and so on. I don't necessarily think, and this is my skepticism talking, and by the way, I know with real skepticism is not like this fundamental crap, which is just, oh, it's Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and stuff like that. I'm talking about like real cognitive thought, you know, like, because you can prove some things and you can disprove things, and there's compelling things, or there's gray areas, or anomalous things, right? But when it comes to that aspect of me, if I don't have a soul, then what is that? Like, like, there are so many arguments that I don't think I can really put into words today. I think I'm absolutely, like, tired. But when it came to this aspect of a soul, like, am I soulless? What am I? Who am I? What I find with these atheists is that they do what's in psychology is known as body identification. They identify or self-identify with themselves as a body. I have a problem with that, because I am not a body. I am not just a body. I am not just this body. If I was just a body, then I could say, well, this person's body is better than mine, so that person must be better than me. The judgments of things, just based on the body, don't work. They don't work for me at all. It's just this gray area, there's these gray areas, there are these questions I have. And this idea that very popular among the atheists, even though it's not actually atheism, this idea that you die and that's it, it's nothing more or whatever. When it comes to like other aspects of hard science, and I mean hard science, things start sounding really odd and strange and weird, and even though I acknowledge that I'm not a quantum physicist and I'm not a physicist, but I have an interest in these topics, and I absolutely love to hear the real physicists bicker about their opinions, because they actually do the real calculations and they understand these things. And I personally am better at thinking more in the conceptual area of this stuff, and I am very horrible at calculations. I'm really bad. I cannot understand calculus. I don't know, maybe because I've never really had a class, but nobody's ever actually tried to really teach me so that I can understand it. I could do some algebra, but with limitations. Geometry is easier, but there's a level of geometry that is difficult for me, but whatever. I don't know. It still boggles my mind that people in Massachusetts have like very little concept of geometry, like symmetry. It annoys me to no end. Like, how do you not understand when you're making a kite that it needs to be symmetrical for it to work? Like, that is just crazy, but whatever. Anyway, but I mean, think about it. Think about yourself. Like, if I think about myself and I use my own feedback mechanism, like, for example, for example, take your parents. Your parents are most likely getting older now if you're my age. Most likely they haven't taken care of their body. I try to. I seriously do. A bit frustrating because I'm a bit broke. But, so, am I supposed to just look at my mother who has a bad back, or my father with a bad knee, or they've had, diseases like alcoholism and things like that, and I go, oh, well, they're degenerates, or they're this or that, or they're horrible, they're this or that, or I'm better than them because my body is blah, 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 right? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It seems a bit superficial to me. It doesn't work. And then people who are atheists will talk about, well, I don't need a religious group or organization to have morals. Well, I agree with that, but yeah, you don't need to do something good just because you think there's some reward. I agree with that totally. But that's not what atheism actually is. That you're talking about philosophy. And I think people need to understand what they're thinking of, why they're thinking of it, and so on. Like, I think people do not do their due diligence. They do not do their, I have right here the Wikipedia page, which I know everybody's going to be like growing, like, oh, it's not exactly blah, blah, blah. Like, if you just look up ethics, the page on Wikipedia has changed many times. So, like, here I have, like, for example, the thing that I don't understand is why people seem to think that Atheist's sacred book is Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin. It's a book about biology. I have I mean, I have it right here, open here. It was On the Origin of Species, I'm sorry. On the Origin of Species. It's a book about observation, so on. I don't know how you get that there's no afterlife out of biology, unless you self-identify as a body. Honestly. I find that to be problematic. It doesn't work for me. Then there's another thing of when it comes to sciences and so on. I've had a number of, I would just like to call them anomalous experiences. They definitely happened. They definitely occurred, and there's a number of things that happened with other people. So I don't know what to think. I do wonder personally that if many of these religious experiences that people say they have, or spiritual things that they say they have, or probably do have, if it's actually not really spiritual, but more of a paranormal, paranormal meaning to run alongside of normal. I think it's more likely a paranormal event, and that our limited understanding has sort of either viewed it as something very evil or something very divine. And there's a lot of these things that, you know, have a very trickster-ish aspect or quality to it, and that was the thing that really, like, I don't know, for a lot of things, fucked up my life. That I don't want anything to do with a lot of these people in these groups anymore. I used to be very avidly involved with like these different spiritual groups, New Age, paranormal, etc. But I felt like they didn't practice what they preached, and that they were very, you know, grandiosity driven. You know, either they wanted attention or fame or money, or what drove me nuts was people whom it was like their badge to the world was that they were oh so spiritual. But when it came down to like actually doing something, when it really mattered or really counted, they weren't there. They could care less, and they would yell at you for it. And they, like, people in these spiritual groups would say that, oh, a rape victim, it was their karma and they deserved it, you know, or like all the people who died in 9/11 were meant to be there, they were meant to die. It's really insensitive. I mean, there was like this whole undertone of insensitivity for certain things, like these people who were supposed to be spiritual. And I've experienced similar things in yoga classes. Not all of them. I really much like yoga, but I'm in it more on a secular level. And I have said this before, and it really bothers me. You know, both of my grandfathers fought in World War II, and there was a Holocaust going on, a Holocaust. And I remember being in classes in the 80s and the 90s, and like there was teachers who talked about their families who were in the Holocaust and so on. And people in the classroom, like I remember we watched movies like, I think Schindler's List was one, and there's probably several others, people say, well, how could somebody not do anything? Or why didn't people just speak up? I mean, there's so many people, or blah, blah, blah. And I've been to Germany, right? And people would say, well, they were just scared, or this or that. But then there were these other people whom were, like, the institutions who were supposed to be there for the people, supposed to help the people, whether it was religious or, you know, caring individuals, people in charge, people whom were elected, right? Well, I had experiences in yoga classes where I felt like they were the same type of personality whom, if the Holocaust was next, like down the street or next door, they wouldn't want to even acknowledge it because, oh, that would be me thinking negative. That would be me being negative. I don't want to think about bad thoughts. I don't want blah, blah, blah. No, if something wrong is happening, you do what's right. I mean, you know, I can't stand by and do nothing. I can't. If somebody next to me, like next door, is killing, whether it's Jews or children or puppies or people or like whatever, doing something really horribly wrong, what am I gonna do? Go, oh, that's being negative. I can't think those things. I need to think positive thoughts. I need to blah blah blah. I need to be spiritual. Yeah, but you're not being spiritual if you're just going to allow it. If you're in a position to help out or to do something or to speak up, and you don't, then you're guilty too. You're enabling it. So, but I don't know. I still do yoga, but I don't do it at all for any of because there's aspects of Hinduism in it. There's aspects of sometimes even Buddhism in it, and like depending on who the teacher is and what their views are. I do it for my own physical benefit, for my own like well-being or whatever. It's a physical thing that you're doing, physical. When you meditate, you know, you have these unusual experiences, and I've had several of them. But what am I supposed to do? Just because I'm having them, I mean, I have dreams when I go to sleep. That's a biological function. But then I have other experiences that I cannot explain, which go beyond that. So if I don't have a soul or a spirit or whatever this concept is or what it means, I can't just pull it out, dissect it, and go, oh, there it is. Same thing with like chakras. I got into a fight over a so-called friend or a former friend about chakras. You can't just pull it out of your body or dissect it and say, oh, this is exactly how many you have. I mean, I remember, actually, you know what, I don't even know if Wikipedia is still this way, but this was like a few years ago when you would go on Wikipedia, and this page has changed several times. But there was a disagreement about how many main chakras somebody had, or how many chakras there, blah, blah, blah. And it seemed like every guru had a different opinion of that, or whatever. Oh, this is fact, or this is fact, and blah, blah, blah. Based on what? It's a meta topic. It's a meta topic. But, I don't know. Just because, like, even when it comes to, like, a deity, what is that really? Honestly, what is a deity? Like, when you look it up in the dictionary and you look it up in an encyclopedia, you don't find the same thing. Same thing with a monad or the monad or whatever. A lot of gray area. A lot. I can't make definitive assumptions based on a lot of things if I cannot prove it. And I don't really put myself out there to make definitive statements or things unless I know for sure. Like, if cops on Occupy Wall Street were brutally massacring people and you have it on video and it's absolutely real from many angles, and we have the corpse and we have the blah blah blah, well then that's for sure it freaking happened.